Hey everybody, it is Mike Petralia, Trags, back with the latest episode of the Code Reds podcast on the CLNS Media Network. We are just days away as we record this from opening day 2024, the Cincinnati Reds and the Washington Nationals in really what should be the perennial traditional season opener around baseball. It's kind of gone the way of the dodo bird, but it's still an important, very critically important and festive day in the city of Cincinnati and Southwest Ohio. It is the start of the baseball season, and there's a lot of optimism coming up with these 2024 Reds, even though they've kind of been through it in spring training. It is my pleasure to welcome on this episode of Code Reds certainly one of the great Reds in terms of pitching that we have seen in the last 50 years or so, and that would be Jeff Brantley, Cowboy, voice of the Cincinnati Reds, along with Tommy Thrall on 700 WLW. Cowboy, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Trags. How about you?
I'm doing very well. I am very much looking forward to this season, but as I said in my long-winded open, the Reds and David Bell have kind of already been through it. However, when it comes to the pitching staff, I actually think there is good news coming out of spring training, at least in terms of their health, simply because Nick Lodolo looks like he's on the mend and should be ready to go maybe around April 8th, April 9th, somewhere around there. He'll be in the rotation. I think this bullpen is stocked and much deeper than it was last year. And Cowboy, maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you won't. I thought that was really one of the key breakdowns towards the end of the season last year. They were just burned out.
Yeah, I think in today's world, when we're only getting 4 and 5 innings from our starting pitchers, bullpen is even more critical. And it's not just those last 2 innings that we've seen over, I guess, my lifetime. Right. It's really the last 4 innings. And if you don't have some guys, not only solid veteran guys that can handle the lead up to the 9th inning and the pressure that goes along with it, but guys that you can move. In today's roster management, all of these general managers want to have young pitchers or pitchers with options, I should say.
Yes.
That they can move between AAA and the big leagues. So you're really expanding that roster to a different size than just the 26.
Yeah, and what to me struck me about the way Nick Krall went about building the roster and building the bullpen in particular, something you have intimate knowledge of, is you don't have just one guy at each role. You have 2 and 3 guys who can come in, and that extends the rotation over a course of a week or a couple of weeks where a bullpen might be particularly taxed. I think the Reds have the option, and David Bell has the option, and Derek Johnson, the pitching coach, they can go look at that bullpen, kind of mix things around, and not feel like they're, overusing their bullpen.
We hear the term so often now in baseball, roster flexibility.
Yep.
Now, in my day and age, when I was playing, roster flexibility meant that you had an extra 2 or 3 guys on the bench to come in and hit or play a different position.
Right.
This day and age, you want your shortstop to be able to play center field, maybe be able to play second base. You want a guy that can pitch in the 6th inning and might be able to close for you in a day when your closer has pitched 3 days in a row. I mean, this is crazy stuff, and yet you still have that stuff that I mentioned earlier about the roster options.
Yeah, and one thing that strikes me about this Reds bullpen, even though they have options and there's a lot of versatility there are still distinctive roles that will be defined in David Bell's bullpen. Alexis Diaz is the guy for the 9th inning. He is still the closer. And, while it has changed over the years and over the decades, Tony La Russa, of course, famously kind of started changing things back in the 80s and the 90s, but he is still the guy toward the end of the game. And then you have a lot of strong power arms, Lucas Sims for one, to set things up. But I think the Reds have more options to get to Alexis Diaz into the 8th and 9th innings.
Yeah, I agree. I think the addition of Emilio Pagan and ultimately the addition of Nick Martinez at the back end of the bullpen is really going to make things a lot easier for David when it comes down to choices in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. Nick Martinez, obviously right now with Nick Lodolo on the injured list, will be in the starting rotation, but what a nice guy to have at the back end of the
Oh,
bullpen to get the ball to Alexis Diaz.
and his performance against the LA Dodgers, I think that was one of those moments during spring training. And Jeff, you and I know, certainly Chris Welsh was quick to remind me during Code Reds a couple of weeks ago, spring training is spring training. Be careful not to read too much into it. But when he has a performance like that, and he had a terrific spring out in Arizona for the Reds, it kind of does raise some eyes that, hey, this is a guy that could really impact the rotation if he's needed there going forward.
Yeah, I think you're right with Chris's commentary on being careful of spring training, especially this day and age when we put so much stock into just numbers and raw numbers. As a matter of fact,
Mm-hmm.
You've got to use the eye test in spring training, and you've got to figure out, okay, why is this player that I would expect to be a C player performing like an A player and better than any of my other starters? Well, number one, the guy's probably been hitting all winter long. He's probably played winter ball. He's a dead red fastball hitter, and that's all you're getting at the beginning of spring training.
Okay, let's get to the starting rotation in particular, and two guys that I think, Cowboy, the Reds are going to need good to very good performances from if they're going to contend. Like a lot of people thought, midway through the offseason when Nick Krall made all those moves and additions to the bullpen, they need Hunter Green and Graham Ashcraft to really step forward. I think certainly Graham Ashcraft has shown that bulldog mentality, and I think he has got the arm, the strength, the attitude. Hunter Green is somebody who, in his final start on Sunday of the spring against Cleveland, he looked pretty good. He looked better than he had the last couple of starts. How important, and I guess from your point of view, what are the keys to get Hunter Green on track early in the season?
I think, Mike, probably the biggest issue for Hunter is being able to take some of that part of bulldog mentality from Ashcraft and kind of incorporate it into his deal of pitching. I think for Hunter, really, it's trying to get out of third gear, and it's not just being tough or being mean or any of those things. I think it's understanding the pitching concept. I think for a guy that throws the ball 100 miles an hour, I mean, let's face it, coming up when he was 9, 10 years old, all through high school, if he had gone to college the majority of his time in the minor leagues, why would he throw anything else? He just throws fastballs. But once you get to the big leagues, everybody hits velocity. It's just kind of the way that it is. So you have to be able to mix in a breaking ball. You have to mix in a changeup, or at least some type of secondary pitch. But for a guy that has totally relied his entire life on, here it is, see if you can hit it, it's kind of tough to back off and say, well, why should I throw a slider? There has to be a learning concept there. And I know that Derek Johnson works with him on this nonstop. There has to be a thought process. Why do I throw that slider and when? And that is what I mean when I'm talking about getting out of third gear and moving on up.
Okay, what about the pitch that has been all the rage, but something certainly a pitch that you know very, very well, and that is a split finger fastball. It seemed to, I don't know, disappear a little bit from the lexicon of pitching language in the last, I don't know, 10 to 15 years. Now it seems to be making a comeback. Certainly Graham Ashcraft is working on that in spring training. As we have mentioned, Hunter Green is looking at working in a breaking ball. Why is the split finger fastball, do you think, going to make a comeback?
I think the reason that we call it a split finger fastball, number one, is it's basically a pitch that you can throw with your fingers split apart and it takes something off the fastball, but you're throwing it with the same fastball arm speed.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of guys, and I'm included in this. When we first started throwing a split finger, we weren't really throwing a split finger. We were throwing a fork ball. We were jamming our fingers down into the
Deeper
ball,
into the grip. Yep.
deeper into the grip, making the ball dive. Now, the difference between the two, and I'll be totally honest with you here, when you're throwing a split finger fastball, there's more control to it. When you're throwing a fork ball, there's not as much control. So you have to kind of manipulate that ball in your fingers for each individual to decide, okay, am I throwing a split or am I throwing a fork? Do I want it to bounce in front of home plate, or do I want it to have fade and the guy hit it off the end of the bat or maybe pop it up? Most pitchers, when especially a power pitcher, i.e. Hunter Green, when you throw a changeup, you're thinking to yourself, what the hell am I doing throwing this? I'm throwing a ball 80 miles an hour when I can throw 100. Why would I fool with this? That's what you're thinking in your head. So in order to be able to take something off the ball and actually have some movement and have that determination of speed where you're really sliding the ball back a little bit, that you use that split because you can be aggressive with it. You can really rip through it, and it feels in your brain, I'm throwing a breaking ball, when in essence, I'm throwing the changeup.
Did you learn it from Roger Craig?
I did. And that got me to the big leagues.
Yeah, and got a lot of pictures to the big leagues. Certainly. When did you learn it from him? In the 80s?
I learned it in 1987. I was going to Puerto Rico to play winter ball because I knew I was a 4A pitcher. That's where I was at. And the only way I could get to the next level, I was not going to be able to throw the ball 95 miles an hour. I threw hard, but I just couldn't throw the ball by a guy in a fastball count. And I had to have something for a left-handed hitter that went away from him so I could come back in with the slider. And I started throwing that split. Now, what I threw was a fork ball, but my fingers were not as big and my hands were not as big as some of these guys that we see today. So I had to get deeper into the ball to get any kind of action at all. Because when I tried the normal split finger grip, it just didn't work. It didn't look good. It didn't look good to me. And to be totally frank with you, it has to look good to you. I don't care what everybody else says. Right. If I don't feel good about it, I'm not throwing it.
So here, and I may be totally off base here, Cowboy, but I look at the split finger or the changeup like Mario Soto. I covered Pedro Martinez for years in Boston, but before Pedro, it was Mario Soto and his changeup or the split finger fastball. You don't see a lot of taller pictures like Randy Johnson, even Hunter Green, who has a lot of length and a lot of arm length, throwing off-speed pitches, especially like a splitter, simply because they rely on the slider and maybe a curve, but their fastball, two-seam, four-seam. But when you don't have as much elevation, you're not naturally, blessed with a lot of height. I think you have to come up with pitches that deceive the pitcher. That's why I loved watching not only yourself, Cowboy, but guys like Glavine and Maddox with the Braves. They weren't overpowering physical specimens on the mound, right?
They pitched with their head.
Yeah.
And you can talk about this a lot, but it's much more difficult to do it in-game scenario. When you talk about using the outside corner to lead the batter back over the plate, and then you throw a strike that's middle in, that in a normal count, the guy hits into the second deck, and you throw it on the inside corner with two strikes, and you see that's the best pitch in baseball. I mean, that's the greatest feeling for a pitcher, not a thrower, a pitcher, to strike out a guy right on the inside corner on a meat pitch that he's looking, when you catch him when he's looking away.
And I also think one thing a guy like Hunter Green has to work on a lot is getting hitters to start swinging at pitches that aren't strikes. And, he's going to obviously strike out guys on his fastball, on his gas, 100, 102, 103 miles an hour. But to me, when I see him getting guys chasing, that's when I know, okay, he's starting to pitch. Do you look at that the same way?
I do. And I think that's the case with anyone that is a straight over the top thrower without the special movement left or right. When you're throwing a high velocity fastball, and a lot of us looked at this in the beginning, you see somebody come out that's throwing 100 miles an hour, 102, and everybody's on it. And you think, how's this happening? Well, the reason that it happens is because they never have to swing at a ball on the edges, because the pitcher never throws it on the edges. He's throwing it right down Broadway, and it's usually mid-thigh high. If Hunter Green had great fastball location, he would never give up a hit. He would stay on the edges, and when the hitter got used to seeing that fastball on the edges, that breaking ball that starts on the edges would get a commitment. So that's the whole art of pitching. When you start talking about a guy that throws the ball 100 miles an hour, he should flat dominate. The reason that he doesn't is he doesn't have fastball location.
What impresses you the most about Alexis Diaz?
I think intestinal fortitude would be the first thing that I would throw out there for you. The one thing that Alexis does that nobody really talks about, he's closer to the plate when he releases the ball than any other pitcher in baseball.
Right.
He's not Randy Johnson size. It's the drive and the stretch that he gets, and basically that low 3/4 arm action when he releases the ball. But you talk about a guy that normally is going to throw 92, 93. It looks like it's 98, 99 because how I mean, he's a 1.5 feet closer than some guys. I mean, that's crazy. Think about that. I mean, you could take the mound and move it 1.5 feet closer. Yeah, you get a lot of people out. But that's the reason that he has such a great effect on hitters and why you get those awkward swings.
I think he is, this goes without saying, I think Cowboy, he's one of the key players and one of the biggest keys on the 2024 Reds. You agree that maybe, I don't know, is there another step he can take this year?
I do. I think that for him, when you step into the big leagues and it's your first year, especially in that role, because I remember doing that really early in 1990. We had just gone to the World Series, and I'm closing ball games, and I'm thinking, God, this is a whole different animal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not just about stuff, and if you get caught in that avenue, you're going to be in trouble because there are days that you're going to go out there, you don't have great stuff, but you still got to get outs. And I think for him, and we saw this a little bit last year, he started pitching backwards a little bit, breaking balls early, and then he'd light some guys up with that high fastball late because guys have trouble picking up that first fastball from Diaz. Rarely do you see a guy step to the plate, first pitch fastball, and they hit it out. It just doesn't happen. He's got that fastball that you've got to see a couple of times before you can square it up. So with that being said, I think that's where the progress can be made, but to be honest, Trags, when we were in spring training, a lot of guys were talking about, God, Diaz is getting hit hard. I mean, his last time out gave up a couple of runs. I don't look at that any different than I would any guy. I mean, it could be Nolan Ryan out there. Doesn't bother me a bit because for Alexis Diaz, now that he's gotten a taste of that adrenaline and just that fuel to the fire at the end of the ball game.
Yep.
That's what it takes. There's no way to get that in spring training. So when he steps out there for the 9th inning and it's the first time he's getting a save, his blood is going to be rushing and he's going to be slinging it.
I want to go down memory lane here and ask you about 2 seasons. Okay. I want to ask you about, and I want to make sure I got this right, the 93 Giants and the 95 Reds. And your recollections from both of those clubs. And, obviously, I think you know why I'm asking you about the 93 Giants. It was one of the singular best pennant races ever back when we had divisions, right before, it was the last year of 4 divisions in Major League Baseball, right?
That's exactly right. I remember that so vividly because we lost.
I know. I'm sorry, but
on the last day of the season to the Dodgers in LA. And if you're a Giant fan or a Dodger fan, then you totally understand this. It's kind of like that Alabama-Auburn thing down here in the South. But I remember Darryl Strawberry, and this was like a year earlier than the 93 season. He asked one of the reporters from San Francisco, why are these guys trying so hard? Because we knocked them out. Why are these guys trying so hard? It's a rivalry. That's what that's about. And when we got to LA in those last 3 games, we're playing our dreaded rivalry. The Braves are at home playing the Colorado Rockies, who they had already beaten every single time that year. So we're thinking, all right, we've got to sweep the Dodgers here in LA. And we won the first 2 ball games, but we just couldn't get the last one. I mean, the Dodgers just beat our brains out on the last day. And that was just, when you win 104 games and you go home,
that's just,
bro, I'm still mad.
I'm telling you, I think that's one of the primary reasons we have a wild card today.
Well, I'm glad that we do. And for people that at that point in time were a little standoffish about us moving to this kind of format in the playoffs. I agree with you. I think that is the reason why.
And I'm going to obviously be remiss if I didn't ask you about Davey Johnson and the 95 Reds. What stood out to you? I'll tell you what I remember. I think you guys were 2-8 and down big to the Mets on a Saturday afternoon. Do you remember that game?
Not really, not yet.
Okay, it was a very slow start to the 95 season, and that was obviously coming after the Reds had, the best record in baseball in 94, and the strike ended that, and there was no World Series and whatnot. But in 95, the Reds got off to a really poor start, and then you guys caught fire, and obviously, won the division series. The last time any Reds team has won a playoff.
I do remember that whole year. I can tell you that.
That won that postseason against the series against the Dodgers. Not Jeff Lewis, Mark Lewis, pride of Hamilton, Ohio, grand slam in the game against the Dodgers, and then 4 straight L's to the Braves. But anything stick out to you about playing for Davey Johnson?
I love Davey. And I tell people a lot of times, I think he's the best manager I ever played for. And not just because he did the right things on the field. There are a lot of managers that do that. I think Davey's ability to manipulate players to do what they needed to do was just incredible. And Brett Boone and I were talking about this the other day. It's just amazing when you look back and you see how Davey would either take you out of the lineup or pat you on the back or not talk to you. I mean, there were so many different ways that he got players to do what they needed to do. Not what he needed them to do, but what they needed to do and what was best for them. And I think that when you speak of the term manager, dude, that's what it's all about. Get the best out of your people.
See, and I will tell you, I had Dibs on a couple of weeks ago, Jeff, and he said the same thing about Lou Piniella. And when you're talking about Davey Johnson, I hear a lot of the same characteristics about Davey that I did about Lou from Rob Dibble.
Yeah, I think that player mentality for both Lou and for Davey, they had that internal competitive combustion, however you want to talk about it. I mean, they had the fire, and that translated to their players. Now, Davey wasn't as outwardly fiery and crazy like Lou was, but as a player in that locker room and spending time, you got the idea. This guy hates losing. He hates losing, and it kind of transcended towards the players. And once you get that, where you come to the ballpark every day expecting to win, that gets pretty fun.
Yes, it does. I'm going to end on something else that's very fun and very close to your heart. And I'm just a novice. Mind you, when I ask you about this, but pickleball.
Oh,
how did you catch the pickleball bug?
I really didn't want to play at all. I had my shoulder replaced a few years ago, and I wasn't really. I mean, I was doing good to get the milk out of the refrigerator. When you say put everything you've got into the game, I gave it all I had. I mean, body, soul, everything. So here I am now, and I'm 60 years old, and I've got a 16-year-old. I just wanted to be able to play catch. I just wanted to be able to let my son experience that with his dad, just that father-son. So I go and get that done, and didn't think I could ever play any sport again. I had to quit golf, and my wife was playing pickleball when I got home from the season just this past year. So she wanted to go out and hit some. So I get the little paddle. I'm thinking, oh, what is this? I go out and I hit, and I'm thinking, I think I could do this. It's kind of that ping pong tennis, kind of in between. Started playing. The more I played, the better my shoulder got. And no pain, nothing. Started getting better and better, stronger. I like, sometimes I thought, geez, I might be able to pitch again. That's kind of crazy to be able to think that way, but that's how I got the bug. And now I can't quit playing.
So I need advice, because as I said, I'm a novice and I'm playing with the Mrs. Deborah Ann, and we have a lot of fun down on the riverfront. Usually Sunday mornings, sometimes Saturday mornings, and we go down and we have a blast. But I still can tell that I don't know what I'm doing out on the court, and I'm trying to get more comfortable playing the game, Cowboy.
Well, imagine an imaginary square on the edges of the court just past the kitchen. Can you picture that?
Yeah.
That's where you want to hit the ball. Now, when you get up to the net, if you're holding your paddle in front of you, you're going to get smoked. You have to pretend that you're rocking the baby so the paddle moves back and forth this way, because if your elbow is in, you're never going to get to that side, and you're never going to get it. So
See?
this little tip of rocking the baby that I got, that works. It works.
I'm going to tell you, I will be using Rock the Baby, and that will be in my mind the next time I'm on a pickleball court, because I do understand it's a sensation sweeping the country, and it's obviously, what's the word I'm looking for? It's grown into a national sport on TV, and it's played by professionals now.
I love watching it. I love watching it. I mean, I never watch tennis. Every time pickleball's on, I've got it on.
Wow. Well, see, I'm still a big tennis fan, Cowboy. I'm still a big tennis fan. I love tennis. One more thing, and I'll let you go. 69-51. I had picked your Bulldogs in the first round, and Mississippi State lets me down against Michigan State. That was a killer in my bracket, just so you know.
Well, I think when you look at that club, they did everything right except for being able to shoot threes. And when you're in a tournament, especially if you're not shooting threes, you're not going to win.
And they did not win. This has been a treat, Cowboy. We covered a lot of subjects in a short period of time. How excited are you for Thursday? Pretty excited, pretty pumped up?
I'm very excited. And not only am I excited for the guys, because there's a lot of young talent and a lot of young energy, and that's fun to watch, because they're like new babies, and they're just, everything that they do is new, and you don't know really what to expect the following day. But I'm excited for our fans. I mean, we're getting to see some great players. This is going to be really cool.
It is really, to me, once in a generation in terms of the talent that's coming up right now and hitting its prime. And you just hope that they take the next step. Cowboy, is there anything you want to promote before I let you go? Website or anything like that?
No, I'm just kind of me.
That's good. Then I can tell people to keep listening to Cowboy and Tommy Thrall. And Cowboy, you do make your cameos with John Sadak on Bally Sports Ohio on the TV side. But primarily, I think it's safe to say you are on the air with Tommy Thrall on 700 WLW, the big one, where you can hear every single Cincinnati Reds game during the 2024 season. Cowboy, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Trags. Enjoyed it.
All right, he is Jeff Brantley, the Cowboy, voice of the Reds, along with Tommy Thrall. I'm Mike Petralia, Trags. Thanks for downloading and watching this episode of Code Reds.